Well, hello everybody. This is all about innovation today, and I'll be talking to you about the theory of innovation and everything around it, what goes into it, and so on. This is basically a compilation of insights regarding this topic. So the first question that people might ask themselves is, what actually is that innovation? It is a buzzword that we hear used a lot, probably overused by some people who don't really know what it is. Every organization, every company these days is trying to make themselves look innovative, and they're using this word and they're saying, oh, we are such an innovative organization, we are using innovation wherever we can. But is it true, and what actually goes? So let's take this step by step. Basically, when you are innovating, you are creating new values which typically meet new needs. Now, they could meet old needs as well, but typically when something is an innovation, it is warranted by there being new needs that you answer to. These needs come in three different types. So the first type, which is my personal favorite, is the inarticulate need. The inarticulate need is a wonderful thing because it basically means only people with special insight, such as designers, forecasters, engineers who are on the verge of something, scientists, and so on, would need would know what an inarticulate need of their client could be. So the inarticulate need is a need that the client doesn't know he has. We are basically saying we have insights into this material that our client does not have, so we are telling them what they're going to need. Such as an example, this is my favorite example, I believe that the electrification of traffic basically means that coffee sales are going to go absolutely through the roof in the next 10 years. And why is that? That's because all these people who have electric cars are going to be spending a lot of time waiting for them to recharge at electric filling stations. What do you do when you have 20 minutes to bring your vehicle up to 80% charge? You go for a coffee. So I really think that places that sell coffee and everything else like tea and biscuits, these kinds of places are going to have their heyday in the next 10 years. After that, I don't know, because battery capacity of vehicles could get to the point where you no longer have to do that. But this is an inarticulate need. Nobody realizes this yet, but we will need a lot more coffee because of these electric cars. That was an inarticulate need. There's the opposite of that. There's the old customer need. Now, the old customer need, I'm using a police car here, Swedish police car, if you forgive me, to illustrate what a typical old customer is. And I think the police represents an excellent old customer because they always have the same needs. Police will always need to have means to pursue criminals, to investigate crimes, to protect themselves physically. They will need bulletproof stuff, stab-proof stuff, you name it. The needs of the police are very well known, and that makes them an old customer with old customer needs, and you can perfectly well predict what they are going to need. So the police have old customer needs. And then there are the market needs, which can fluctuate wildly depending on what happens in the market. Now, the market could fluctuate due to all sorts of things. Oil price, new inventions, fads, fashion, you name it. So I'm using a roll of toilet paper here that is single wrapped, just as an example. Who knows? You might be in a place where suddenly legislation demands that all toilet paper that is sold by the single roll needs to be individually wrapped. There. This is a market need. Okay. One mistake that a lot of people make is that they mistake innovation for invention and vice versa. So what actually is the difference between invention and innovation? I think the most important thing we can remember about this one is innovation and invention are not the same thing. It is true that any invention is probably an innovation because it is new, but not every innovation is necessarily an invention. How do we tell the difference between the two? An innovation just means something new, something done in a different way, change, if you will. Innovation just means change, and this could be a very subtle change, this could be a change that does not constitute all the criteria of an invention, simply because not everything about it is new enough to warrant something like a patent application or something like that. To be able to qualify for a patent application, you have to present something that the world has never seen before, and that is an invention, something the world has never seen before. Innovation is not that strong necessarily. Innovation can already be something that is merely a little new. You know, if it was green before, now it's blue. That's an innovation already. Okay, I hope you get the difference. So just to make it perfectly clear again, innovation really is nothing but change, and invention, a revolution. Another slide here. Let's just say you have a cat. Let's do something innovative. Let's say the cat is getting a different brand of cat food today. As far as the cat is concerned, that's innovation. That is an innovative thing happening to this cat, because now the cat food is no longer fish-based, it's pork-based. Cat innovation, right? An invention it would be if you find out that if you cook bicycles, cats go completely crazy for it. Yeah, you invent a new kind of cat food based on cooked bicycles, and it's a freak discovery, and everybody goes, my God, I can't believe this, and nobody would have guessed, and nobody has seen this before. Cooked bicycle cat food. Now that is an invention, right? Let's look at the different types of innovation, because there are differences between them. We have 4 to be precise. This is a classic innovation matrix on which you can gauge what kind of innovation you're looking at in any given scenario. I won't dwell on this too long without illustrating. First example, sustaining innovation. Please don't mistake this for sustainable innovation, which it is not. Sustaining means updating, really. When you conduct sustaining innovation, you are basically making sure something stays fresh enough to keep on standing its ground in the market, if you will. So somebody who performs a sustaining innovation activity might say something like, we know exactly what we are looking for in this product, and there is a clearly defined goal that we are aspiring to. And a typical example, which I'm showing here, is the car industry. You may have noticed that a new car comes out, and actually it doesn't look that different from the previous model, but it looks a little different. And that is called a sustaining innovation. The new thing comes out, and it is quite reminiscent of the old thing, but slightly fresher, slightly updated. Everything about it is the old thing, just better. That is sustaining innovation. Now, the next thing we have here is disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation means you're doing something just a tad more different than before. The motto might be, let's try something new and see what it does in our context. An example of this might again be the car industry. We know so far the car industry has been making mostly petrol-powered cars. Now they're switching to electric. That is disruptive innovation as far as all these manufacturers are concerned who have so far been making petrol-powered cars. Because they're still making cars, they're just doing an aspect of it differently. So that is disruptive innovation. You're still making the same thing, but you're making it different in a significant way, in a very important aspect of it. You may be surprised to see basic research included in this, because we wouldn't normally consider research an active contributor to innovation. But the fact is that research activity, as you know, research often unearths possibilities and conceptual options that pop up. We designers do a lot of this. If you've gone to a car show, for example, you see all these really over-the-top concept cars, which nobody expects to see in the market ever. And that is basically a way of showcasing what you might be capable of come the right time and need. So in this way, all these surprising ideas that see no imminent implementation can be put to use as well in an innovation context. If you have some crazy stuff that nobody wants right now, well, put it in a concept. Make it the thing for the future that might be coming at us 15, 20 years from now, when the time is right and when the tools are right. And then finally, we have this, the breakthrough innovation, which is a term that is overused by industry. Industry often proclaims things as breakthrough innovation that is really a much tamer thing than that. And that's because breakthrough innovation is considered the absolute king of things that could happen to you. If you're an innovator and you have a breakthrough, well, obviously that's something to break the champagne open for, because then you have a revolutionary idea, something that nobody has thought of before. And to get that, to stay with the car industry, let's say somebody actually discovers how to do teleportation. That's the end of the automobile as we know it. That is breakthrough innovation. Star Trek fans, you know what I'm talking about. This is about beaming you up. Beam me up, Scotty, is the well-known phrase. So that would be an absolute breakthrough innovation if somebody were to come along and completely replace convention with something absolutely unimaginable that we have never seen before. That concludes different types of innovation. If you know these, you're doing well. And on we gallop. One of the things that you will need to do when you work in innovation is you need to apply innovation management processes for many different reasons. Innovation management is actually a well-known discipline about which you can find a lot of literature, and many famous people have written books on this. So if this interests you, it's worth checking. In innovation management, we are basically saying that there are two types of innovation that you can deal with. The manager, either you manage a process of product innovation, which is typically what happens in an R&D context, research and design context. We are developing a new product. Industrial designers, engineers, these kinds of people do a lot of that. Or, and this might surprise you, do this. You can simply change an organization or a process within an organization, and this can happen absolutely anywhere. As you may remember, I said before that innovation is nothing but change. So change happens in organizations all the time. Change happens in hospitals, in doctors' offices, at the vet, at the fire department, you name it. And somebody needs to manage this change, such as, let's stick with the fire department. New technology is being brought in. A lot of things need to happen so that the firefighters can make the best use of it. They need to get training on this. They may need special storage for the new hoses or the new fire trucks, who knows what. But this is organizational innovation, and innovation management processes can be used to manage these. And then there are two different kinds of innovation processes, pushed and pulled. I'll show you. The pushed innovation process is what a lot of people dream about who have an invention and have a patent. They had this amazing idea and they want to do something with it. Yeah, they might have discovered how to make water. You just have to, water that comes in powder form. All you need to do is add water and you have water, right? Something like that, okay? So that's an innovation process that is pushed, which means you've got it, you want to do something with it, and by God, you're going to push that out into the world and something will need to be done with it. Somebody has it and needs to go out. That's the pushed innovation process. And then you have the opposite, which is the pulled innovation process. And it's a slightly more sophisticated thing that is easier to do and can be run more professionally because you don't rely on chance and these kinds of things. The pulled innovation process basically means somebody perceives a need somewhere and then creates an innovative solution to solve that need or to answer to that need. I'll show you some examples for these two. A typical pushed innovation process is this one here. Car freaks will probably remember this. This vehicle, the Citroën DS, is a French car from the 1950s, which had a very unusual suspension system. It is, I think, still being made. Normally cars have steel springs, coil springs, like what you find in your pens. But Citroën came up with this solution here where you have a liquid and gas-filled chamber that a piston pushes into sorry, to achieve dampening of wheel action. Now that was their invention and they ended up running the entire vehicle with it. The steering column, the power steering, I mean, and the brake system and everything ran on this semi-pressurized system. And it was their property. They owned the patents on this and they wanted to push that out into the world, make that something to be known for, and capitalize on the market advantages. And they did. So for decades, Citroën cars were the only ones, pretty much, with the exception of Rolls-Royce, who used this technology. And then there is the opposite, we might remember, the pulled innovation process, where you don't have the idea yet. So I'm showing you some examples now of companies that have created their entire philosophy around solving a perceived problem. Here they are. Just to go through them quickly, I hope you can see my little cursor here. This company, Green Door in New Zealand, is, I would describe that a lean kind of estate agent. And they basically work through self-marketing. The need they are answering is people may not want to pay estate agents fees when they sell their houses because they're high and they may want that money. So this company makes it possible for you to sell your own house. Hush Puppies. You've probably noticed that brand. Hush Puppies, to my knowledge, are a company which discovered a need for shoes that don't squeak. You may find this funny, but when rubber-soled shoes first came out, they had the problem that if you walked down waxed floor corridors, they made squeaky noises that sounded like little yapping dogs. And this company, I believe, then created a rubber mixture that prevented this noise from occurring when you walk down the corridor. And that is why they're called Hush Puppies, because they're no longer making these yappy puppy sounds. You know IKEA, of course, which is or used to be all about furniture that is slightly cheaper because you can assemble it yourself. And obviously you can also take it home more easily because it comes in parts as a kit. Linux is another company that perceived the need that people shouldn't have to pay for software. So they went into programming things with the help of the public. And then Volvo has found this need of improved safety in vehicles. So these are all companies that have identified needs and latched onto them to define their own purpose in life, if you will, around them. And that would be pulled innovation, what they've done. They have perceived a need and they're answering that need. That's pulled innovation. There is a lot of theory stuff available on innovation, and one of the most prolific authors on it is David Smith. I'm going to give you a bit of a distilled rundown on the things that he wrote. I think what is most interesting here is the theory of innovation, because it allows us professional innovators to talk about our work, but more about. So why do we even need the theory for this? Personally, if you can communicate well about your innovation, then you will be more successful. And there is a need to, well, because innovation can be complex. There are many stages involved, many people involved, stakeholders. You will want to have the correct terminology to express what you're doing so that you're coming across as convincing. You may find yourself wanting to advertise this, or you may want to speak to journalists, you may want to do some PR, you may want to go crowdfunding with your innovation. So if you can explain what you're doing so that the common man understands, you are at an advantage. And ultimately, the success of your undertakings may depend on how well you are able to communicate everything about your innovation. Different theories that we have on and different aspects of it. There's this interesting thing that pops up in most products. This is called the technology S-curve. It looks a bit like that. I apologize for this little bump here. That is actually not something we need. The technology S-curve is like this. It starts here, and as you see the product come to life and take hold in the market, it reaches a peak. And at that stage, you really should have a new product up your sleeve that can take over, which will then go through the exact same development in its own time. We're basically saying everything has its heyday, and you need to have the next thing lined up, the next innovation lined up to take over when a product's popularity and success declines. That is why we do innovation. That is what keeps a lot of companies in the market. They keep pushing out the next thing and the next thing and the next thing as soon as or just before the previous product declines in popularity. This can be done in easy ways. This graphic here shows what has happened historically to hard drives. Hard drive development, or hard drive innovation, if you will, was a very simple thing. They simply increased the performance of the hard drives over the years. So here you can see 1984, 1988, and so on until 2006. And the only thing pretty much that kept them alive was to keep going up with the performance and the storage capacity. That is one way to do innovation. Another thing that we have here is what they call the punctuated equilibrium. The punctuated equilibrium basically only says, even though it looks difficult, it means that as soon as somebody comes out with a technological solution, people will start finding ways to use it. Typical example, computers. Somebody thought up the computer, and all sorts of things were then done using computers later on. So this is how it basically works. That's what that looks like as a graph, just in case you need to see that. And then there's this interesting phenomenon, the so-called dominant design. There's always a dominant design in the market, and it becomes so well known that people begin to associate its name with technology. For example, the Excel sheet. These days, when somebody asks you to provide numerical information in a well-organized way, the first instinct is, oh yeah, I'll do an Excel spreadsheet. The thing is, though, there are a lot more spreadsheet solutions out there than Excel. But we call it an Excel sheet right there, don't we? Because that is the dominant design. Everybody knows these, everybody uses these. Kleenex is another example of a dominant design in the market. When you ask somebody for a paper tissue in the US, for example, in my experience, people ask for a Kleenex. And that's actually a brand name. So Kleenex is the dominant brand or the dominant design in the paper tissue business, because perhaps they were the quickest to establish themselves with what was then an innovative solution in the market. So everybody now associates them with paper. This here happened to me. I designed roller, almost made the mistake now, inline skates. I designed inline skates for a little while in the industry. And when I got into that business, everybody in the States called these things rollerblades. And I was told by my colleagues at the time that that was the wrong nomenclature, and that actually you need to refer to these things more generally as inline skates, not as rollerblades. But the company Rollerblade had managed to become the dominant design in the market, so everybody just called these things rollerblades, which is again a brand name. In Great Britain, the same thing has happened with vacuum cleaners. In Great Britain, a vacuum cleaner is called a Hoover because the company was the one that invented or introduced the vacuum cleaner in Great Britain. Now, all this is nice, and you may want to ask yourself what you need to actually take hold in the market with your innovation. Sorry. It is nice to be an innovative person, and it is good to have an idea. But what if the world isn't ready for it? Now, how ready the world is for your stuff, that is called absorptive capacity. You can very much liken it to a sponge. So if the watering can we see here on the left is the idea, the innovation, the intellectual property, name it what you will, then the thing on the right here, the sponge, is the readiness of your intended target group or user group to accept something new. And that acceptance is influenced by a number of different things. One of them is knowledge. Do they even know enough to want something new? If they don't, you will have to do a lot of education. If they do, lovely. When they do, it is normally because they've read something in the news or they might be aware of a problem in their field through other channels. But the main thing is your target group needs to be in the know of the problem to demand an innovation. And that knowledge needs to remain present. So you actually need to, it's one thing if they've read it once, it's quite another if it looms large in their minds. So I think what this point really means is your target group needs to be actively motivated most of the time to really demand and accept innovation. And then there is this, they call it diversity of experience in literature. It basically means if your target group has never experienced anything but one solution, they are less likely to accept that there are other solutions. So let's say we are approaching a little isolated manufacturer of something somewhere, and they have made this product they have made for the last 60 years in a certain way, and they're not aware of anybody else making this. If you go in and say, hey, you know, guys, I found a way to make this thing from recycled corks, it's not very likely they're going to be very thrilled by this. On the other hand, if you come to a manufacturer who has tried 15 different things in the last 2 years, they will clearly be very open to your innovation. So how does all this theory that we've seen help us innovators? Innovators being designers, architects, engineers, whoever creates new. Obviously, if we know our theory, and there is a lot of it in the libraries of the world, we are able to better describe what we are also better able to analyze the situation, and we're also obviously better able to analyze somebody else's innovation, which we may be required to take over. We might be in a team, somebody else might have done some work and we are taking over. And it will also help us predict any possible success or non-success of the innovation. So to give you a bit of terminology here, what we are describing is basically the innovation process, key events in the innovation process, and how they are linked. That is what you would describe. When you're analyzing the key events that occurred during the innovation process, and perhaps there are even patterns we can learn from that occurred. And in the innovation outcome in the future, there may be likely developments that will occur. There may be issues popping up. And again, we are using the theory to describe these in a professional way. So, where does this stuff come from then? Innovation doesn't just manifest out of thin air, it will have an origin. And I believe that the main origin of innovation is insight. Unless there is insight, there usually cannot be. And insight can be created in different ways. A very simple way is association. You put two things together and they create something new. We know, for example, that if you put yellow paint and blue paint together, you get green paint. So there we have a possible reliable source of innovation every time. You put two things together, and if they are compatible, or if it is possible to actually put them together to some effect, you may have a source of innovation right there. You could try an adaptation. An adaptation in this case would be an old solution for a new problem. You may have heard about this, but there are camels in Australia. They were apparently brought in by colonial forces by colonial British forces. And They make excellent patrol vehicles, if you will, for the outback police because they're perfectly happy in the desert. You can ride on them, and they cause you a lot less trouble than a car would, and a lot less cost as well. So if you find something that has worked elsewhere and use it to solve the same problem in a new context, you have yourself a very nice source of innovation. Similar to this is the analogy. Legend has it that the inventor of Velcro went for a hike and found that the burrs sticking to his clothing had some very interesting properties. And he suddenly realized, hey, wait a minute, this could actually be put to some good use. If it can stick to my clothing, perhaps we can make that happen on purpose, and perhaps it could be used to close a shoe. And there we go. That was the start of Velcro. And it has to be said, as it is, you can also source innovation just through sheer luck, such as the telephone. The telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, and he never intended to do that. It just happened because he was fiddling around with stuff and he realized that his voice was electrically transported to another area when he put certain components together. And then he made use of that discovery. So that is the final of insight. Now there might be agents who bring you people, we are saying. People or events. Now who can bring you innovation? Who can provide innovation? I believe all these agents here, these 6 different things, can bring you innovation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, didn't promise too much. Let's look at these. This used to be the classic. In the 19th century, you had the lone genius who came along and brought you things like the steam engine or electricity or the diving suit. And they had cobbled this together in their back shed and just brought it to daylight, and everybody was like, wow, where did that come from? This guy did it. And this still happens. You still get these people. So it's perfectly possible that your company might be approached by somebody with a patent or somebody with an idea, and that is one provider of innovation to you. You can turn that into a strategic effort, which is what the R&D or research and design context does these days. So you make it your job to innovate. Then you have professional innovators at work. These are very capable. You could bring in what they call the consultant user. Like, for example, medical innovation is best done with a nurse or a doctor in attendance because they can give you very good information about what the new thing needs to have so that it will be successful. You could even have an outsider approaching you. Who knows? Somebody who goes, it's not my field, but I discovered that this and this happens. Can you use that? And this is actually how the photocopier was invented. I don't know the exact story, but you can obviously read that up somewhere. That's a typical example of somebody just happening upon stuff out of the blue who had nothing to do with this, didn't even understand what they had there, and just handed it over to someone. You do actually necessarily create spillovers. Spillovers are something that occurs in the R&D industry necessarily when you undertake innovation efforts. when you're trying to solve a problem, you come up with all these different solutions, and only one of them will eventually make it. So what do you do with the others? Obviously, you don't dump them, you keep them on the shelf until maybe you use them for something else someday. I was once working for a company as a designer, and they asked me to file everything I did, every sketch, every model, every CAD model, because even though it may not have seen the light of day as a production piece, it may still be good for something later. So once, for example, I worked for a company that was doing mag wheels, for cars. And I came up with all these different mag wheels. I was a very young designer at the time, probably a bit overzealous. And my boss told me, create a few design solutions here and present to us at the end of the week. So I went crazy and used the photocopier and everything. And it created 140 different designs of mag wheels. And my boss, to my surprise, wasn't thrilled at all. He said, "Oh my God, who's going to use all these things? Just give me your three best ones and put the other ones in a folder." And I was like, oh no, I've done all this work now and it's going nowhere. But turns out later, I hear from my colleagues at the company that they're still using these 140 odd designs that I did at the time to satisfy the needs of their current clients now. So that is a spillover that I've created. I've created way too many possible solutions, way more than were required, and they put them on a shelf, and that's a spillover. Or you suddenly come up with something that is needed to create something bigger. The construction helmet, for example, was a typical example of that. In the process of making construction site work safer, people invented all sorts of things along the way. So even though the core activity was construction, it had all these off spins, all these required um, things on the side that then became novel products in their own right. Once upon a time, the construction worker helmet was a very new and innovative thing, and it came from the activities that surround construction. So that's that. This is where your sources of innovation are as far as theories. In other news, there has been a bit of a change in who actually creates this innovation. Just as a a little story on the side. As I mentioned earlier, in the 19th century and before, the new stuff usually came from one individual who pursued this and its development just by themselves mostly. And then in the 20th century, there was a tremendous change in that, probably brought on by the two world wars. And making things perform better and changing things for the greater good became a matter of national interest. So people found a way to accelerate innovation by putting task groups together who did that. We know how much innovation and how many useful bits of technology we benefit from today just because the war effort actually required them. For example, fuel injection in cars. That came about because the warplanes just didn't run reliably on carburetors, and something had to be found to make them run better. So fuel injection became the technology used on airplanes in the war, and its benefits were then also eventually trickling down into the car industry. And it's interesting that we see a move away from this. Clearly, now that there are no more big world wars going on, the situation is subsiding a little bit, and we can see down here that we are now experiencing a bit of a hybrid between what used to be the case, the lone genius, and that concerted strategic war effort. So now we have small companies, not only, but we have some small companies, and quite frequently have small companies pursuing R&D with a few staff members, usually starting one person by themselves. When you look at things like Tesla, Elon Musk, or Linux, these were all started by lone genius type people, and then they started grouping some professionals around themselves. And that is pretty much a hybrid of previous models that we've seen. So our innovation process has certainly become a little more professional through the experiences in the 20th century. Just for fun, a little case study to show you what innovation might look like. Since we've been talking about spreadsheets earlier on, the first spreadsheet in history, first computerized spreadsheet, was the VisiCalc. VisiCalc was created by two Canadian university students in 1979. It looked like this. This green stuff there on the screen, that was the first spreadsheet. And would you know it, up until this time, up until 1979, accounting was happening on sheets of paper like that. So everything was handwritten. The potential for mistakes was obviously gigantic in these things. So Brickling and Frankston were the two people who invented a computerized spreadsheet and gave us this. And that is where it all began and where our came from. So just as a bit of anecdote on the side. We haven't actually looked at the process of innovation yet, the process as it is integrated in R&D, in industry, where the work happens. And there are different. Typically, you get this lineup, this string of pearls, if you will, of instances that the innovation has to go through. You begin with your insight or your research. Then there is development going on. Solution proposals are beginning to pop up. And then you begin to become more specific. You specify the solutions for the context. Once that's done with, you go into engineering detail, feasibility, manufacturing. Can it actually be made? These things start taking place, prototypes are popping up, and we're making pilots, trying things out. Then you enter the manufacturing stage, and then it gets launched. So these are the instances that are affected by innovation. And finally, we need to protect our innovation, don't we? Because we don't want people to take it away. Now, I'll just briefly brush on these things because they're huge, but my deal with the world is to explain things as concisely as possible. So here are the 6 different kinds of intellectual property that you can have. I'll quickly explain the difference between them. Patents are the king of intellectual property protection, usually. A patent is going to grant the inventor or the inventors an exclusive right to make, use, sell, and import an invention for a limited period of time. That limited period of time can be between 16 and 20 years, to my knowledge, depending on which country your patent is valid for. And you will want to know in which country your main marketing interest lies, because that, I think, is where you should be having your patent. So if your patent is made in China, but you aren't thinking about selling it there, but in the US, you better get a US patent, because that is where you want to protect your marketing rights. In that case, there may be more than one inventor, and this may happen more quickly than you think. If you have told anyone about what you have done or what you're developing, these people may need to be named as your co-inventors. Such as, let's say, you tell your wife, and she says, if you make this in green, it could be nicer. And you take that on board. Well, then your wife is a co-inventor and must be listed. If you're working for an organization like the military, for example, or a university, it is common for them to be the patent owners. If you're working for a company and you are making this invention as part of your work, the company will need to be the patent holder, usually. So this is something to keep in mind when you are inventing and patenting. What will happen next is your invention will be publicly disclosed. That means anyone who knows how to rummage through patent office stuff is going to be able to see a complete explanation of what you have invented, and they will be able to do so forever, because all your information is publicly disclosed at the patent office. And you can get a patent for a product or a process. Let's move on. The copyright. Copyright is a very different thing. The copyright gives the creator of an original work exclusive rights for a limited time. And this applies to, I would call these softer types of innovation, may not even be innovation at all. For example, if you remember the Calvin and Hobbes comics, they are copyrighted by the author. Why can they not get a patent on Calvin and Hobbes? Well, that's because little boys and stuffed tigers have been known to the world for a long time. You cannot get a patent on Calvin and you cannot get a patent on Hobbes. But you can get a patent on a look, which is this third point here. So a copyright does not cover ideas and information. It only covers the form or manner in which they are expressed. So the way in which Calvin and Hobbes is drawn makes them specific, gives them the character, the unmistakable character of Calvin and Hobbes, and that is what is protected. So the copyright doesn't mean that nobody else can draw little boys or stuffed tigers, as long as they draw them differently from the original Calvin and Hobbes author. Now here's a thing called the industrial design rights. The industrial design right is not industrial design right, but industrial design right, okay? And it's a feature, really. A visual feature of an object which has specific shape, configuration, composition, pattern, color. I'm using the 3 Adidas stripes here as a prime example because they are not really a rigidly defined, measurable thing like a logo, but they can occur in many different guises. All these shoes, all these products of Adidas have these 3 stripes on them, and they may fan out in different ways, they may come in different colors. So here, an industrial design right is what you want to apply. And this can be a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional thing, and these things are arguably 3-dimensional because they follow the shape and form of the product. The trademark is another thing that everybody intellectual property. It is defined as a recognizable sign, design, or expression. We all know the Coca-Cola bottle and the Coca-Cola writing is used specifically to identify those products. So Coca-Cola owns the trademark on this shape of bottle and on that type of writing, and that is their trademark. You can have a trade dress, which is a different thing. Trade dress, here I'm using an old American organic sticker, which you can purchase to use on your product to signify that it conforms to certain standards, for example. So it's about, it will have certain characteristics of visual appearance, and it will source such as organic milk, organic everything. I wonder what other examples we might have for this. I think another trade dress might be perhaps something like fair trade could be a trade dress. But I think you get the picture. It's that kind of thing. And then in the end, you've got the trade secret. Now, the trade secret is an interesting phenomenon because it doesn't have a formal process to follow. It's just something the company keeps in a safe, I suppose. May be a formula, it may be a description of a practice or of a process. And nobody knows about this. Everybody who does will probably be bound by confidentiality agreements, which leads to it not being generally known. And it will give an economic advantage over his or her competitors. And I'm using KFC here as an example because the coating they apply to their fried chicken is a trade secret. It is not patented. You cannot walk into a patent office and read up on the KFC chicken coating patent. It doesn't exist. Why would they do such a thing? Why would they not want to protect it with a patent? Well, clearly, there are more reasons than one. Some people might go, oh, they don't want to know what's in. Well, there might be that, yes, because if everybody knows what's in it, once the patent has expired, everybody can do it. And I think KFC were pretty clever here in not applying for a patent, because by not applying for a patent, they ensured that they will have the monopoly on this kind of chicken coating forever, as long as the secret stays a secret. If they had a patent 16 to 20 years down the road, everybody would have been able to just do this because the patent would have expired by then. So that, I think, is the true reason why they do this. And if you're planning to be in business based on one innovation alone, it's probably better to keep very secret how you're doing it and not applying for a patent, because that way it will be yours for hundreds of years if you keep your secrets well. And that is it. And it concludes our hour on innovation. I hope you found this interesting. And well, check it out. There will be other lectures by me available. Wishing you all the best now, and have fun.